This is Beyond the Business.
We talk about aviation like it's just another way to move people and goods. Fast, convenient, and global. But aviation is not just transport, it's a shortcut across the planet, and shortcuts always come with a price. Air travel works because we burn a huge amount of energy to save time. That's the deal. And once you see it clearly, the whole system looks different. Business trips, holidays, and next day delivery, fresh products, flying across continents. It all feels normal because airports and airlines made it feel normal. Today, I want to stay away from politics and slogans. This episode is about the real mechanics, what keeps aviation running, what it costs, and why air transport creates a footprint most people don't notice until it shows up somewhere else. So, let's talk about the real economics of aviation. Most people look at flying as a simple transaction. You buy a ticket, you board, you land, done. But the ticket is not what makes aviation possible. Aviation works because an entire public system exists behind it. Airports, terminals, traffic control, security zones, border controlled, infrastructure, access roads, etc. That is not airline business. That is national infrastructure. And the large part of that infrastructure is paid by society, not only by passengers. Even if you personally never fly, you still fund aviation through taxes and public spending, because airports are treated as strategic infrastructure. They are part of mobility, national security, economic connectivity, and trade readiness. The system is built to stay available, not only to stay profitable. Now, add the second layer, as the airports are not one time investments, they require continuous spending, maintenance, inspections, lighting systems, navigation systems, emergency readiness. Aviation doesn't stop. It sits on standby every day, even when demand drops. So the cost is permanent. That is why flying can look cheap on the surface while the real bill keeps growing underneath. The passenger pays the ticket, society pays the backbone. This is the same pattern we see across modern infrastructure. The system is shared, the costs are shared, but the benefits are not equally distributed. And once you understand this, you stop seeing aviation as a personal lifestyle choice. You start seeing it as a publicly supported economic system, where ticket prices are only one layer of the real cost. If you look at a flight ticket today, you will often see a number next to it, CO2 per passenger. It looks clean and it looks simple, almost like the story ends there. But that number is only the flying part, because aviation doesn't start in the air, it starts on the ground, long before the aircraft moves and long before you even enter the terminal. First, the airport itself. A big airport is basically a small city that never sleeps. Lightning, ventilation, security, baggage, fuel infrastructure, runway maintenance, fire services, ground vehicles, all that runs every day, even when you personally don't fly. Then comes the aircraft preparation. Planes don't just wait at the gate, they need constant support, power, air conditioning, loading, and when a plane sits on the stand, it still consumes energy. One simple example is the APU, the auxiliary power unit. It's a small turbine that provides electricity and air when the aircraft is on the ground. If external power isn't connected or if operations are delayed, that APU runs. It burns fuel before the flight even begins. And then you have taxing. Taxing looks harmless, but it can take time. It burns fuel and it happens at huge scale, so even before takeoff, emissions already started. Now zoom out one more step. Even before the airport and the aircraft, there is fuel. Jet fuel doesn't appear at an airport by itself. It comes through a chain of extraction, refining, storage, and transport. Every step uses energy, every step creates emissions. By the time the aircraft burns that fuel, part of the footprint is already behind the scenes. So, this is the part most passengers never see. And the ticket number shows you one slice, your seat during the flight. But aviation environmental footprint lives across the whole upstream chain. The airport running 24/7, the ground operations, the standby power, and the fuel infrastructure feeding it all. So when airlines talk about emissions, the real question is not only how efficient the aircraft is in the air, it's also how heavy everything around the flight is before the flight even begins. Now let's talk about climate risk. If you ever had a flight delayed because of weather, you already know what this feels like. You get a message on your phone, the gate changes, the boarding time moves again, everyone just waits. And most people treat it as normal, bad luck or random event. But it's not random anymore. Aviation is extremely sensitive to weather because the system runs on tight timing. When conditions shift, even slightly, the whole network starts slipping. Heat limits performance, storms close airspace, heavy rain floods ground operations, fog reduces visibility, and strong winds slow down arrivals and departure. And once delays start stacking, airports don't recover quickly. This is not just theory. Eurocontrol tracks delays across Europe, and weather is already showing up as a growing driver. In 2023, weather related delays increased by 35% compared to 2022. That's not a headline, that's operations. And here is the part that connects directly to you as a passenger. Because every weather delay has a cost, not just for the airline, but for the whole system. A plane sitting on the ground is not free, it's still part of a live operation. The airport is still running, the crews are still on duty, the ground services are still moving, and the longer the delay lasts, the more waste builds up around it. Then the financial part comes in. Airlines try to avoid cancellations because cancellations are expensive. They will push and push to operate the flight even when the day is already falling apart. Because the moment they cancel, the bill gets bigger. And in the end, that bill doesn't stay inside the company, it ends up inside the ticket price. Even if your specific flight takes off on time, you still pay for the system that has to absorb these disruptions every day. That cost is baked in through prices, fees, schedules, and airport infrastructure that keeps running no matter what. So, this is the loop we have quietly built. The climate becomes less stable, flights get delayed more often, the system burns more energy to keep itself moving, costs go up, emissions go up, and passengers pay more for a service that becomes less reliable. So that is the real problem, not the delay itself. The problem is that the system is already spending more just to stay operational, and the underlying conditions are still getting worse. So here's the uncomfortable part. Flying is not just a personal choice, it's not just a ticket, a seat number, and a carbon estimate on the booking page. It's a full industrial chain that keeps running even when nothing moves. Airports still consume power, planes still wait, ground crews still work, and schedules still break. And when weather disruption becomes more frequent, the whole model starts paying twice, once through emissions and once through inefficiency. That's the real shift. Because climate risk is no longer something aviation plans around, it's something aviation is already operating inside. And when that happens, the question changes. It's not can we afford to fly, it's can we afford to keep flying the same way inside a world that is no longer stable. That's the real cost of air transport today.